Welcome to the Brewing Wellness Podcast, nourishing UFT members, one conversation at a time. Brewing Wellness is a podcast created by the UFT Member Assistance Program to support the mental health and well-being of our members. In order to do the work you do every day and be present for your loved ones, students, and patients, your cup has to be full. Brewing Wellness focuses on mental health and wellness topics that can help us all thrive in our professional and personal lives. We'll be releasing a new episode on the last Monday of each month. Remember to listen to the Brewing Wellness Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And please, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's get started.
Hello, and welcome back to the Brewing Wellness Podcast, hosted by the UFT Member Assistance Program. My name is Jocelyn Joseph, and I'm a clinician with the UFT Member Assistance Program. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Mike Veny. Mike Veny was determined to overcome a lifetime of serious mental health challenges to become a professional drummer and change maker in the wellness industry. He's the author of several books, including the best-selling book, Transforming Stigma: How to Become a Mental Wellness Superhero. His expertise and life experience have been featured on ABC, NBC, and CBS News. Mike Veny has also worked with the UFT Member Assistance Program on a variety of workshops and a podcast in the past, and we're excited to hear his expertise on today's topic, summer self-care. As we all know, summer can be the time for our members to kick back, relax, and engage in some much-needed self-care. However, for a lot of us, the question is, how do we best engage in self-care? Mike Veny is here to help guide us into the best ways to engage in self-care and rest over summer break.
Well, hello to you listeners out there. My name is Mike Veny, and I am actually at the UFT headquarters right now. And something I said to Jocelyn when I came here was that it just felt good to be here. Excited about working with all of you. I've gotten to present to many of you and just really happy that you're listening. And I want to tell you a little bit about me and self-care and give you some tools that hopefully you can use to enjoy your summer better. I am from Long Island, New York, Strong Island, and I grew up in Hempstead, actually, and I struggled with mental health challenges my whole life. I never thought I'd be like sitting here recording a podcast talking about this stuff. Like, this is the stuff that, my parents, like, no one could ever know about this. But I've been struggling since I was in fourth grade. And with mental health, just a reminder to all of you that, mental health is about three things: thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And if any one of those has an issue, you got a mental health issue. It's not just in your mind. And for me, as a child, it manifested as behavior problems. And that led to me getting expelled from 3 schools, starting in fourth grade, hospitalized at a mental hospital 3 times, and lots of other things that come with mental health and behavior. And even now, I'm doing much better. I'm well behaved now. That's why they let me in the UFT building. And I still struggle. I struggle every day with depression, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, a lot of times people use these terms, but I've actually been diagnosed with them. It's not, sometimes with this obsessive compulsive disorder, people think, okay, well, I'm very particular about certain things, so it's OCD. No, this is a clinical thing where, like, even now as I'm recording, I'm trying to focus. I got my little script right here. I'm trying to focus, but I have other things on my mind, and I have to really get myself back into podcast mode so I can record it. So that's an example of the struggles. My depression is so heavy that I feel it physically in my body. It's not even like sadness. It's just physically heavy. And the anxiety, well, that's just every single day. And on top of that, like you, I have to function in the actual world and deal with like life. And so that's really, my journey has been going through that. And the thing that turned my life around was drumming. I'm a professional drummer by trade, so I shouldn't be here recording this podcast. I should be doing a music podcast. No, I'm joking. I'll do that at some point. But I'm a drummer, and drumming gave me a self-care outlet, a very important outlet that centered me, that I still use to this day. And fast forward through drumming with the Wounded Warrior Project's physical health and wellness team, started to learn about this thing called workplace wellness. I was like, what is this? And that evolved into the career I have now, which is a corporate wellness specialist, whatever that's supposed to mean. And so I help people in workplaces. And it's so important because, we have to show up at work for like 1/3 of our life, I think, or something like that. So it's really important to be well in the workplace and out of the workplace. And that's basically my journey of how it all began. During the pandemic, we all had pandemic projects. Everybody had a pandemic project. Some people cooked, some people DJ'd. Me, I decided to get my company accredited for continuing education. And I actually started doing my first podcasts with the UFT during that time. And so we have now continuing education courses around self-care, anger, so many different things, resilience. And our mission is to support people in discovering the gift of emotional wellness. This is actually very important because when I say emotional wellness, a lot of people think it means happy. No, it means showing up for your emotions. All of them, including the ones that you don't like anger, grief, and fear. Most of my life, I acted out because of my emotions. I got put in the mental hospital. I did self-destructive things because of my emotions. And what I've learned as an adult, not just professionally, but personally as well, which goes into the professional, is that emotions are one of the greatest gifts that we have, even the difficult ones, especially the difficult ones. And so that's the work that I'm doing now. And oftentimes I talk about self-care. And this is a topic that I love talking about because I feel like we hear it just too much. Like everything is self-care, self-care. It's like, yeah, I know I need to do that. Let me explain to you. Just take a moment and just hear me out here. What self-care is, in my opinion. Self-care is what you do for your health when you're not in the presence of a medical professional. A lot of people think it's luxury, the spa. Yes, but it's what you do for your health. So if you showered today, if you brush your teeth, that's technically self-care. And so when you're thinking about this topic, you don't need to overthink it. It's stuff that we do all the time, but oftentimes we don't do enough of it. And that's why we're having this conversation. It's different than a thing called escape activities, though. Escape activities allow us to escape our thoughts and feelings. And self-care ones, we usually show up for our thoughts and feelings. Usually. And I say usually because it's subjective. Take something like walking, for instance. That's a self-care activity, right? Not necessarily. It depends on the person. It's a self-care activity if you're using it for your health. But if you're going for walks to escape an abusive household, that's an escape activity right there. The key is this. It's just important to be honest with yourself about what you're doing. One that I bring up often is Las Vegas. Love me some Vegas. You want to go to Vegas? Let me know. I know the hotel deals and the prime rib specials. That's an escape activity, though. I'm very clear with myself when I do that. And I'm clear when I say, you know what? I am going to go on a retreat by myself for a day where I'm just quiet and gaining some time with my silence, my internal silence. So it's important to understand those definitions. And what are some ways that people can engage in self-care? Well, honestly, you know the answer to this, so there's not anything that I can really say. However, I will say it like this, that there are 3 ways of looking at self-care. There's self-care for daily living, self-care for coping, and self-care for healing. So I live here in New York City, but during the pandemic, I got a house, got me my first house, Hudson Valley. This is a lot different than an apartment, by the way. And the house, well, there's a lot involved. I love going up there, but it's a lot involved. So I realized that maintaining this house is a lot like self-care. So hear me out here. Self-care for daily living. When I go up there, I'm supposed to do certain things, like take out the garbage, got to do laundry, I got to clean the dishes, put things away, sweep, get the mail. That is self-care for daily living. Maybe I have to check the temperature, check if there was any flooding, make sure this works, that works. If the power went out, make sure the refrigerator's working, all that stuff. That is self-care for daily living. So in your case, it might mean simply taking your mental health medication. That's a form of self-care, what you do for your health when you're not in the presence of a medical professional. It could mean exercise, meditation, prayer, things you do for daily living. But then there's self-care for coping. This house came with something I have never seen in my life. It was about 4 feet long, 2 feet tall, had these wires and like a gas tank. And I asked the owner, what is this? And he said, it's a generator. I said, what's the generator for? He said, you're in the Hudson Valley. The power goes out up here. And I was like, oh. So I had to learn how to use this generator in case the power goes out. In New York City when I'm here, it's just, I don't know, wait for an update from Con Ed or whatever. But if my power goes out at my house, I have to cope with that. So there are things in your life that are coming up. Maybe, especially since it's the summer, there's a family function coming up. And there's somebody that triggers you. Maybe there's a work meeting that you have to have and somebody triggers you. Maybe it's the thought of back to school triggers you. But either way, having tools to cope, to deal with the things that come up is so important. One example is this. Anger has been a big challenge of mine. And we actually just released an anger course on my website called the Anger Makeover, because we believe that you don't have anger problems. You just need a little makeover with your anger. And one of the things that I talk about in the course is anger is about power. Feeling like your power was taken away from you. And so the key to actually dealing with anger is figure out how to take your power back. And one of the ways that this is done, if you see like a child when they're angry, they stomp their feet. They stomp their feet because they're angry. Think about what they're doing. They're putting their foot down. They've had enough. They're trying to take their power back. They don't realize it. So sometimes I know there's a meeting I actually have to have today with someone, and it's not going to be the easiest meeting, and this person brings up some emotions for me. One thing that I do, this is a coping thing, is I actually, hear me out here, stomp my foot outside before the meeting. By simply just stomping your foot, not hard, just feeling your heel hit the ground, you start to feel a little more powerful. It's a great way to deal with anger in advance. And so it's important to have coping tools that you know you can rely on. And finally, there's self-care for healing, like I said. God forbid a tree falls on this house. At that point, I got to bring in the professionals. There's nothing I can do. And the same is true for you. If you have experienced trauma, you have to bring in the professionals. You can't do it on your own. And I love educators because they're used to doing things on their own. They will get it done. They will get stuff done. But when it comes to trauma, you cannot do it alone. That brings up another thing, though, that I want to bring up is compartmentalizing. A lot of times I meet educators who say, you know what? I know how to compartmentalize. I just want to end this myth for a moment here. None of us can compartmentalize. I always compare it to like movies. I'm sure you've seen like a movie, like an adventure movie, where everyone's going on an adventure, and like there's a door at the beginning of the movie that's got some snakes behind it or something, and they, I don't know, open the door at the beginning of the movie. Everyone sees the snakes, but then they close the door. It's like, okay, don't go back in there. But you know throughout the movie that there's snakes behind that door. And usually at the end, I think they come out and get everybody or whatever. But it's the same with compartmentalizing. If you've been through something, you might think you're compartmentalizing it, but it's still there. And it will come out in ugly ways if you don't address it. So I really encourage you, if you've experienced trauma, and trauma, by the way, is unique for every person. It doesn't mean, Civil War. Your trauma and my trauma might be totally different, but they're equally valid. And so it's important just to address it with a mental health professional. And the UFT has so many resources for that. So I encourage you to reach out, and we're going to talk about those at the end. Some of the challenges of working with self-care for educators. I am not an educator myself. I'm not. My family is all educators. And I guess working with the UFT is like my way of like staying bonded with my family. This is like a form of trauma bonding, I guess. No, I'm joking. I work with educators because I did a survey in 2020 for educators around the country, learning what was really on their minds. And I learned so much from that survey. And on my team, we have educators in my company, and we've hired educators to work with us to help us create this Fill Your Cup, the Exhausted Educator's Guide to Emotional Wellness course, which is also a book as well. And one of the challenges is educators are used to taking charge of a classroom and managing it. And sometimes when summer hits and you don't have something to take charge of, it's like withdrawal from a drug, actually. It's confusing to the body and the emotions. So it's important to ask yourself in different situations, what role am I in? I know, for example, that sometimes I know friends who are educators, and one in particular who ends up talking to their family like the family is the classroom, and has to remind themselves, no, I'm not in the classroom right now. I'm being a parent and a husband or wife. So it's important to ask yourself, as you're going about the summer in different situations, what role am I in right now? What role am I in? That will give you so much clarity. And also, that being said, being okay with doing nothing. Like, literally nothing. After I finish recording this podcast and leave the UFT, chances are when I walk out the building, the first thing I'm going to do is check my phone. Why? Well, because I need to check it. But why? It's because it's a cultural habit that we have. And also, it's a great way for me to escape uncomfortable emotions. Maybe I might be feeling like, well, I don't know if that podcast went well, or whatever it is. I will pick up that phone so I can escape. So it's important to learn that we do that with different things. Maybe it's looking at our phone. Maybe it's just needing to talk to someone. We always feel we need to be doing something. We can't sit still. Learning to sit still. Also, with the type of job that you have as an educator, that's a lot on your central nervous system. And learning to just pause gives your central nervous system a break so you can come back into the school year much better, much more recharged, ready to do your job. And this will help you cope with stress in the future. So I challenge you to make time for that. And one area you can do this in is called meditation and mindfulness. We talk about it a lot, and I know the UFT has tons of resources on this. And I think calm you get. I hear a myth all the time from people when I bring up meditation. You might be saying this to yourself. Just hear me out here. I can't meditate because I can't focus. I'd like to end that myth right now. I don't know how it just permeated culture, but no one said you need to focus when you meditate. In fact, in many types of meditation, it's important to allow your distracting thoughts to come up because that's your body releasing stress. So you just be gentle with yourself when you do it. So anyone can meditate. Doesn't matter if you have ADHD. It's totally fine. Encourage you to start doing that. And, some last words for you. Let's be honest. As I'm recording this podcast, we are going into a difficult time in the world. Some people just say it's a dumpster fire right now. However you want to look at it, there's a lot going on in the world. And the work you are doing with our students is so important. One of the reasons I work with the UFT as a New York City resident, sometimes I'll be going for my walks and I pass the schools and I see you all with the youth just trying to round them up or do whatever. And I have these moments of just gratitude. So I want to say thank you, even though I don't have kids. Just thank you for the work that you're doing for our youth. We know that, you're underpaid and you are overworked and all that stuff. And we appreciate you. We really, really do. And it's important that you're able to give your best to our youth. That's why you got into this work, right? And so taking care of you is so important, especially with the school year you're going into this year with all that's happening in the world. It's important that your students see you as a role model. I think, a lot of times when people talk to me about self-care, I get parents especially that say, I have a kid that's not doing self-care, but they need to start doing self-care. But I'll ask the parent, like, what are you doing? They'll be like, well, no, it's not me. It's my kid. We don't do what we are told to do. We do what's modeled for us. And that's really important. When my mom was alive, I remember she was obsessed with going to the gym. She was into weight training. And my brother and I we work out, but she'd be sitting there at dinner flexing her muscles and saying, look at my muscles. I'm ripped. What's wrong with you guys? Blah, 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 blah. Now, look, I'm not saying that was the healthiest role model there in terms of how she went about it, but My brother and I go to the gym all the time as part of our lives because it was modeled for us. So it's really important that you do that. If you have not gone to therapy, I encourage you to start doing that. It's a reminder that it's about self-discovery for you, and it allows you to surrender and talk to someone who's not a family member, friend, or colleague. One of the greatest things that you can do. But on my website, www.mikeveny.com, and I'll spell that out for you. It's M-I-K-E, V like in Victor, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy, Y as in yellow, mikeveny.com. You can find lots of free resources that you can use for self-care. You can reach out to me through the website. I'd love to hear from you, and I always do my best to respond as quickly as possible. With that being said, I just want to say thank you for listening to me today, and please take care of you this summer.
Once again, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Brewing Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the UFT Member Assistance Program to support the mental health and well-being of our members. If you are a UFT member, the Member Assistance Program can be reached at 212-701-9620 or by emailing mapinfo@uft.org. And once again, please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening.